You ever walk outside and see a bouncy castle where your delivery truck should be? That's how my Saturday morning started. A DJ was setting up speakers on my property, children were chasing each other between my loading zone and the electrical box, and Brenda, our local HOA president and walking lawsuit magnate, waved at me like I was the one trespassing. The kicker? I never agreed to any of this. Not one word. And yet, there it was. My privately owned commercial parking lot had been hijacked by the HOA for their annual block party. No request. No permission. Just a cheap flyer on my windshield that read, "Thanks again for letting us use your space this weekend." It wasn't a thank you, it was a declaration of war. To be clear, I'm not some angry recluse. I own the small tech repair business that shares a property line with the HOA neighborhood. The building and its lot are mine. Paid off. Zoned commercial. My security cameras have caught everything from stray raccoons to Amazon drivers reparking after seeing the signs. The lot's private and well-labeled, but for some reason, the HOA has always acted like my asphalt was just an extension of their cul-de-sac kingdom. At first, it was harmless. A neighbor would park for a minute to pick up their kid. Fine. A few teens once skated there until I politely asked them to leave. Cool. But Brenda? Brenda was different. She had the posture of someone who files complaints as a hobby and weaponizes neighborhood bake sales. She once accused me of hoarding parking spots because I painted diagonal lines for better traffic flow. She suggested I consider donating the space to the community. Brenda thought private property worked like a public library. You just show up and borrow it. The flyer on my car was the final straw. It wasn't even printed nicely, just a Word doc full of Comic Sans and passive-aggressive cheer. We're so excited for this year's party, and we're especially grateful to our neighbor for generously offering his lot for our use. They didn't name me. They didn't ask. They just assumed. I flipped the paper over hoping for a note, maybe a phone number. Nope. Just a crayon drawing of fireworks. Really classy. By noon, tents were being pitched. Someone dragged a barbecue grill next to my building's HVAC intake. Folding tables appeared. One guy, shirtless, naturally, began setting up a karaoke machine like he was about to audition for American Idol. Meanwhile, I stood there holding a coffee I no longer wanted, blinking like I'd entered a parallel universe. And then Brenda approached. "Oh good, you're here," she chirped. "You're just in time to help move the beverage coolers. We're a little behind schedule." I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Brenda, you do realize this is private property, right? I never agreed to this." She laughed, actually laughed, and gave me the kind of pat you'd reserve for a confused toddler. "Oh, stop it. You're always so uptight. It's just for today. It's community building." "No. This is trespassing," I replied. "And extremely illegal." She waved a dismissive hand. "Please, don't be dramatic. No one's getting hurt." As if on cue, a kid screamed in the distance. A soccer ball bounced off my office window. Then a small dog sprinted across the lot dragging its leash, nearly tripping over a speaker wire. "Brenda, you didn't even ask," I said again, jaw clenched. "You didn't call, text, email, nothing. We put flyers out. That counts. And besides, Councilman Reeves is coming. You wouldn't want to be the guy who ruined that, would you?" I looked past her to see a makeshift banner stretched across two lampposts. It read, "Welcome Councilman Reeves, parking reserved." The sign was directly over the handicap spot next to my back entrance. And right below it, a shiny black Mercedes that definitely wasn't mine, parked over the words "Loading Zone, Violators Towed." Oh no. No, no, no. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't throw a fit. Instead, I turned around, walked into my building, and locked the door behind me. I sat at my desk, sipped my now cold coffee, and opened a folder on my desktop labeled, "In case Brenda goes full Karen." Inside was everything I needed. Security footage archives, zoning maps, my insurance coverage documentation, a PDF of my property deed, and the number of a towing company owned by a guy named Rico, who still owed me a favor from when I recovered his encrypted hard drive last winter. I called him. "Rico," I said, "how many trucks you got running today?" "4. Why? You're gonna need all of them. I want every car out of my lot in 30 minutes. He let out a low whistle. "Brenda again? She invited half the neighborhood. And a politician. Oh, it's that kind of party. I'll bring popcorn." I hung up, switched the cameras to record in HD, and waited. From inside, I could see Brenda still directing traffic like a Walmart greeter. Kids were now jumping in an inflatable castle wedged between two parking spots. Someone was taping streamers to my building's exterior. A teenager tried to plug his iPad charger into one of my outdoor outlets. Then the tow trucks arrived. Rico was nothing if not efficient. The first truck had 2 sedans lifted before anyone even realized what was happening. A woman screamed. Someone dropped a plate of hot dogs. A man in a Hawaiian shirt tried to stop a driver from hooking up his SUV, only to be gently waved off by a uniformed police officer I had also notified in advance, just in case Brenda decided to pull her usual "I know my rights" routine. Brenda stormed up to my office window and began knocking furiously. "You can't do this," she screeched. But I could. And I did. And by the time Councilman Reeves arrived, late, of course, his reserved parking spot was gone. His Mercedes? Already halfway to the impound lot. His speech? Never delivered. Instead, he ended up yelling at a tow truck driver while someone recorded the whole thing on their phone. It hit the local subreddit within the hour under the title, "HOA Karen throws illegal block party, gets schooled by the lot owner." And me? I just sipped a fresh cup of coffee, watched the chaos unfold on my monitor, and smiled. They thought I was the villain for defending my own property. Oh honey, they were just getting started. But so was I. The chaos in my lot didn't just disappear with the tow truck. No, it morphed. It evolved. It became the kind of spectacle that made neighbors peek from behind curtains while pretending to water their lawns. After the last car was towed and Brenda was left standing in the middle of my now empty asphalt kingdom like a dethroned monarch, I knew I hadn't just caused a stir, I dropped a metaphorical nuke on her precious HOA party. And while most people would have considered that enough, I knew better. Brenda wasn't the kind of person to go quietly. She was the type to hold a grudge so long she'd eventually try to have it taxed. So I prepared for the next act. Because if there's one thing I've learned from dealing with people like her, it's that the moment you catch them red-handed, they start waving both hands and claiming they were just clapping. I started with documentation. Not because I was worried. I had the legal high ground and the property deed to prove it, but because I knew Brenda and her merry band of suburban lawyers would try to twist this into a personal attack. So I made it all about facts. Surveillance footage? Check. Time-stamped photos of their setup? Check. A copy of the flyer they left on my windshield that could have doubled as evidence in a trial? Oh, absolutely. I even took stills of kids dangerously close to my electric panel and the grill smoke billowing toward my HVAC. Just in case Brenda tried to file some complaint about emotional distress, I'd be ready with a folder so thick it could bench press itself. Next, I reached out to my buddy Jared, a real estate attorney who loved when people tried to play property games. He took one look at the flyer, the photos, and the footage and said, "Oh, she messed up. Big time." He walked me through the potential angles. Trespassing, illegal assembly on private property, zoning violations, and the big one, liability exposure. If even one kid tripped and fell in my lot during their event, I could have been sued. Brenda didn't just throw a party. She rolled a legal grenade into my business and hoped it didn't explode. She was going to learn that hoping doesn't hold up in court. Jared also reminded me about a clause in my insurance that specifically voided coverage for unauthorized third-party events on the property. Meaning if anything had gone wrong, an injury, a fire, a grill explosion, it would have been my wallet on the hook. Not today, Satan. Not today. And just as I was collecting evidence and enjoying the sweet, echoing silence of an empty parking lot, Rico called me. The man sounded giddy, like a kid who'd just won a shopping spree at a tow truck convention. "You weren't kidding," he said. "That was better than fireworks. We got 23 cars out in 26 minutes. I think that's a new record." "You sent the invoice?" I asked. "Oh, it's en route to the HOA board. Itemized. With a courtesy copy to their property management company. And the councilman's office, just for fun." Rico was a man of petty precision, and I respected the hell out of that. I offered to buy him lunch, but he declined. "Nah, I'm too busy reading the HOA's Facebook page right now. It's chaos. Brenda's blaming outside saboteurs. Someone called her Discount Cruella de Vil. I'm having a blast." I decided to do a little light reading myself. The HOA's page was a goldmine. Residents were furious. Apparently, some of them didn't even know the party was happening, until their cars disappeared. One man had left for the hardware store, and came back to find a bounce house where his Camry had been. Another complained about missing a dentist appointment because his minivan was on a flatbed heading toward the county impound lot. And then there was Karen, not Brenda Karen, a different one, who wrote a 500-word comment demanding to know why the community wasn't informed the lot was private property. The irony was so thick I nearly choked on my popcorn. But while the neighborhood descended into digital civil war, Brenda regrouped. Like every delusional general who refuses to admit defeat, she started damage control. That very evening, she came by my business again. This time with a Tupperware container of store-bought cookies and a tight, forced smile that made her face look like it was holding in a sneeze. "I just wanted to say I think things got a little out of hand earlier," she began. "Maybe we misunderstood each other." I leaned against the doorway and crossed my arms. "There was no misunderstanding, Brenda. You threw an illegal event on private property and got caught." She opened the lid of the cookies, as if sugar could dissolve legal consequences. "Look, the party's over. No one got hurt. We can move past this, right?" "Actually," I said, "I'm just getting started." Her smile twitched. I handed her a manila envelope, neatly packed with all the evidence I'd gathered. On top sat a notice. A formal cease and desist, drafted by Jared, along with a demand for reimbursement for the towing fees if the HOA didn't want to face a full civil suit. She flipped through the first few pages, her face draining like I'd turned down her application to join royalty. "This isn't necessary," she snapped. "It really is," I said. "Especially since your little stunt also voided my insurance coverage for the weekend. You're lucky no one got injured. But let's not test that luck again." She looked like she wanted to scream but was too afraid someone might film it. With a tight nod, she turned and stomped back across the lot. The next morning, I got a knock on my office door. Not from Brenda this time, but from 2 city inspectors. Friendly guys, honestly. They were there because of a tip I'd sent in about a large unauthorized public gathering on commercial property. They asked questions, took photos, noted the ash marks near my HVAC from the grill, measured the bounce house clearance from the electrical boxes. When they left, one of them said, "Yeah, she's not gonna like this fine." That was the point. Brenda thought she could use my lot like it was a spare room in her HOA mansion. She thought waving a flyer around gave her some kind of mythical permission slip. But she forgot that I was the one with the keys, the deed, the footage, and most importantly, friends who drove flatbeds for fun. This wasn't about ruining a party. It was about defending boundaries. Mine had just been steamrolled, and now I was steamrolling back. The war had started with a bounce house and a barbecue, but by the end of the week, it would escalate into something far bigger than Brenda ever expected. And when it did, the real fireworks would begin. By Monday morning, it was no longer just neighborhood gossip. It was an all-out scandal. Brenda tried to act like everything was under control, but her reputation was crumbling faster than a store-bought cookie in the sun. The HOA message board had turned into a digital riot, filled with angry posts, screenshots of tow bills, and accusations flying in every direction. Residents who once voted for her as HOA president with wine glasses in hand were now sharpening their pitchforks. And the cherry on top? Councilman Reeves had filed a formal complaint with the HOA for unauthorized use of private property resulting in personal embarrassment and vehicle impoundment. He didn't mention my name, but I could practically hear the steam coming out of Brenda's ears when she read that letter. I knew I'd kicked the hornet's nest, but I didn't expect the hornets to start turning on each other. At the emergency HOA meeting held that night, which someone was kind enough to livestream, Brenda sat at the head of the table with her arms folded tightly, clearly hoping to intimidate the other board members into falling in line. It didn't work. One board member, a retired teacher named Helen, calmly pointed out that Brenda had never brought the block party permit to a vote, much less informed the board that she had claimed access to a lot not owned by the HOA. Another member, Todd, chimed in and said he had specifically asked Brenda how she got permission for the lot, and she told him, "Don't worry about it. It's already taken care of." That set off a chain reaction. Suddenly, 3 different members were demanding to know what else Brenda had taken care of behind the scenes. Brenda's response? She doubled down. "I acted in the interest of the community," she said, her voice tight with indignation. "It's just a parking lot. He's not even one of us, he owns a business. We needed the space, and I made an executive decision." The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. Then came the twist no one saw coming. One of the board members, a soft-spoken guy named Matt who rarely spoke during meetings, cleared his throat and said, "Actually, I looked into something. The security company that provides surveillance services for our pool, tennis courts, and the front gate? It's owned by the same guy who owns the parking lot." Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. "I thought we'd contracted that through a vendor," someone else said. "We did," Matt replied. "But that vendor is his company. We've been paying him for years." That moment was gold. Brenda had not only trespassed and misused private property, she'd done it to someone who literally had back-end access to half the community's security infrastructure. And until now, no one had realized the scope of it. I watched the livestream with a bag of chips in one hand and my phone in the other. My inbox was already filling up with messages from curious residents. A few offered support. Some asked if I was going to press charges. One even invited me to their backyard barbecue next weekend, saying, "You've earned honorary neighbor status." The next day, as expected, Brenda showed up at my office again, but this time without cookies. Just rage. "You had no right to spy on our HOA contracts," she snapped. I blinked. "Spy? Brenda, my company's literally named on the checks you send. You signed them. Multiple times." She flushed. "That's not the point. You're trying to humiliate me." "No, Brenda. You did that all by yourself." She tried to keep up the bravado, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the corner of the office, where the monitor showed security feeds. One showed her standing right in front of the private property, "No trespassing" sign from Saturday, talking loudly about how he'll never stop us. "You're going to regret this," she said. "Already regretting not charging you rent for the party," I replied. "But don't worry. That bill's coming soon." She stormed out without another word. Later that afternoon, a packet was delivered to my office, hand-carried by a legal assistant from a local law firm. Brenda's name was on the return address. She had filed a cease and desist of her own, accusing me of harassment, defamation, and reputational damage. I opened the packet, flipped through it, and laughed out loud. The entire thing was a joke. Her lawyer clearly hadn't seen the footage, or the emails, or the dozens of residents posting online about the disaster. I sent the packet straight to Jared, who read through it and immediately called me laughing. "She really included screenshots from her Facebook page as evidence?" he asked. "Does she think that's admissible?" "She underlined a comment calling her HOA Hitler and claimed it came from me," I added. Jared chuckled. "Oh, this is going to be fun. We drafted a response with so much legal weight it practically dented the table it landed on. Jared didn't just deny her claims. He counter-threatened with a full civil suit for defamation, misuse of private property, reckless endangerment, and interference with business operations. We even added a line item about how her illegal gathering had disrupted several scheduled package deliveries, which we backed up with time-stamped footage and UPS tracking logs. Petty? Maybe. But precise. As the drama continued to unravel, the local community paper picked up the story. They ran a short piece titled, "HOA Block Party Goes Bust After Towing Chaos." The best part? The photo they chose showed Brenda pointing at a tow truck with an expression of pure horror, while a group of confused children stood nearby holding party balloons. The juxtaposition was brutal and perfect. Councilman Reeves made a statement too. He denied knowing anything about the unauthorized event and claimed he was misled by community leadership. He was in full damage control mode. Apparently, the viral video of him yelling at the tow truck driver had not gone over well with his donors. By the end of the week, residents were calling for a vote to remove Brenda as HOA president. She tried to delay the vote, citing procedural nonsense, but the bylaws were clear. Enough signatures meant a mandatory board election. And the signatures? They rolled in fast. Someone even made a Change.org petition titled, "Fire Brenda Before She Throws Another Party on a Landing Strip." It hit 2,000 signatures by the weekend. Brenda wasn't just losing her grip on the neighborhood, she was losing it entirely. And as much as she tried to spin herself as the victim, it was clear the neighborhood wasn't buying it anymore. They'd watched her overstep, lie, deflect, and finally crumble under the weight of her own ego. And I hadn't even played my final card. Because what Brenda didn't know was that I'd recently acquired something very special. Something that would change the landscape of this war forever. While she was busy making flyers and fighting off resignations, I had quietly filed an application that would shake the HOA to its core. Let's just say, the next meeting wasn't going to be about the block party anymore. It was going to be about control. And who really had it? Brenda had no idea that while she was busy fielding resignation threats and defending her crumbling throne, I was quietly changing the rules of the game. See, there's something about people like Brenda. They get so caught up in appearances, in shouting the loudest, in staging their little parades and political theater, that they never take the time to read the fine print. And that fine print? That's where the real power lives. While she was out front waving at neighbors and dodging torches, I was in the back room, sharpening my pen. I had spent the better part of the week consulting with the county zoning office, the local business commission, and a very helpful city planner named Vanessa who had clearly dealt with one too many suburban overlords. The result? I had filed to have my property reclassified, not just as a private commercial zone, but as a restricted use access corridor. In plain English? No more shortcuts, no more neighbor spillover, and certainly no more parties unless formally permitted by the city and co-signed by me personally. Now here's where it gets fun. Once the new classification is in process, which it now was, it triggers a notification to every property bordering the lot. That meant the entire HOA would receive official notices alerting them that their cozy little parking overflow zone was off-limits unless formally approved. I didn't have to say a word. The city would do it for me. And to top it off, I also sent Brenda an invoice. A real, legally binding invoice. $83,760.73. Itemized. Every single vehicle towed, the cost of emergency service interruption, estimated property use fees, security review labor, plus a bonus line for the unexpected councilman cameo. I even gave her 30 days to pay it before forwarding the debt to collections. The day the letter hit Brenda's mailbox, I received no fewer than 8 calls from HOA members. Half were confused. A few were furious. One elderly gentleman named Harold actually thanked me, Said he'd hated the annual block party for years, but was too afraid to say anything while Brenda was running things like a small dictatorship. I asked if he'd considered joining the board once Brenda was gone. His answer: "Can I bring donuts?" We had a deal. Meanwhile, Brenda panicked. You could see it in the way she suddenly started trying to clean up the neighborhood Facebook page, deleting comments, banning members, and making increasingly unhinged posts about property saboteurs and malicious outsiders undermining our community spirit. Of course, it backfired. Screenshots had already made their rounds, and residents were growing more united against her by the hour. Someone even made a meme with her face photoshopped onto a crumbling parking lot titled HOA Titanic, sinking in style. It went viral locally. That weekend, the HOA held its first open forum in years. The community center was packed. Brenda took the podium with the desperation of a game show contestant trying to spin one last wheel. She blamed me, blamed the city, blamed misinformation, and even tried to blame the tow truck drivers. It was all falling apart. Then someone asked a very simple question. "Did you ever have written permission to use the lot?" Brenda stammered. She muttered something about implied agreements and community cooperation. But the crowd wasn't buying it. The silence that followed was loud enough to rattle the air vent. That's when Matt, the quiet board member with the receipts, stood up again. "I spoke with the city zoning office," he said. "The lot isn't just private. It's restricted access now. And Brenda's actions may have voided part of our liability insurance. If anyone had gotten hurt at that party, we'd all be paying for it." Murmurs. Concern. A few gasps. Brenda started sweating so hard it looked like someone had turned on a sprinkler above her. Then came the real bombshell. One of the newer residents, a young woman named Lisa, who had just moved in from out of state, raised her hand and asked, "Is it true the HOA used association funds to pay for party supplies for an event that didn't have legal clearance?" Brenda tried to deflect. "It was a tradition. We do it every year." "Right," Lisa said, holding up her phone. "But we didn't vote on it this year. And we paid for that inflatable castle. That's a violation of Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA budget policy." Boom. Game over. That's all it took. The board voted right then and there to suspend Brenda pending investigation. The motion passed unanimously. Her own allies didn't even defend her. By the end of the night, she was boxed out, escorted to her car by a volunteer with a clipboard who kept reminding her to return her keys and name badge. The next morning, I got a call from someone I didn't expect, Brenda's husband. I'd only met him once, a quiet man who looked like he'd spent the last 10 years pretending to enjoy HOA mixers. He sounded exhausted. "I just want to say I'm sorry," he said. "She didn't speak for me. Or for most of us. You didn't deserve any of this." I told him I appreciated the call. Then he added, almost as a whisper, "She's talking about suing the board now. Saying they violated her rights." I laughed. "Let her try. Maybe she'll throw herself a court party next." With Brenda out of the way, things moved quickly. The interim board members got to work cleaning up the mess. I was formally asked to attend a special meeting, not as a witness but as a potential partner. They wanted my help drafting a new neighborhood access policy. And even more shocking, they asked if I'd be willing to sponsor the next community event, one done legally, with permits and coordination. I said yes, on one condition. The event had to include a dunk tank. And Brenda's name had to be painted on the side of it. Everyone laughed. But no one said no. Later that week, I saw Rico again. He stopped by with an envelope in hand. A check. Turns out one of the cars we towed belonged to a guy with an outstanding bill from a previous job. He saw your story online, realized you knew me, and paid up in full. "Sounds like I'm bringing you good business," I said. "You're more than that," Rico grinned. "You're marketing gold." Then he looked around the lot and added, "You ever think about selling this place?" I raised an eyebrow. "Depends. You buying?" "Maybe," he said, half serious. This is sacred ground now. As he drove off, I looked around the lot, clean, quiet, peaceful. No bounce houses. No DJs. No flyers full of false gratitude. Just lines of painted asphalt and the faint memory of chaos. And yet, something told me Brenda wasn't finished. People like her never really disappear. They just find new ways to make noise. But the next time she tried, I'd be ready. In fact, I already was. The final blow didn't come with a lawsuit or a shouting match. It came with silence. That kind of heavy, loaded silence that creeps in after a storm, when the debris is still settling and everyone's trying to figure out how much damage has actually been done. Brenda had vanished. Not literally, but socially. Her HOA presidency was gone, her name scrubbed from the community website, her once daily posts on the neighborhood Facebook group deleted or buried beneath a mountain of memes and angry comments. Residents had gone from tiptoeing around her ego to openly mocking her at mailbox meetups and potluck. She became a cautionary tale overnight. But while the neighborhood tried to move on, I knew she wasn't finished. Brenda was too prideful, too theatrical to just disappear without one last attempt at vengeance. And when that moment came, I wanted to make sure the encore was mine, not hers. It arrived exactly 2 days after she was voted out. A certified letter was slipped under my door, thick and creased from the kind of manhandling only a truly bitter person could deliver. Inside was her final act of defiance. A formal complaint to the city claiming that my newly rezoned property created a hostile environment for neighboring residents and violated her right to community access. The woman had literally weaponized the phrase, hostile environment, over a parking lot. She attached photos of her now empty driveway, claimed emotional trauma from being ostracized, and even accused me of sabotaging a cherished neighborhood tradition. She called it an attack on unity. I called it Tuesday. I forwarded the entire letter to Vanessa at the zoning office. Her response came an hour later in the form of a scanned document with a stamp that read, "Complaint dismissed. Insufficient grounds." Brenda's last play had been squashed before the ink on her envelope dried. I didn't even need to respond. The system had done it for me. But that wasn't enough. Not for closure. Not for justice. Brenda had walked all over boundaries for years, assuming no one would dare fight back. Well, someone had. And I wanted her to feel that sting every time she turned down her street. So I gave her something to look at. It started with a new sign on the edge of the lot. Simple, clean, and impossible to miss. It read, "Private property, no parking, no HOA access, no exceptions." Below it, in slightly smaller font, "Yes, Brenda. This means you." A little on the nose? Maybe. But cathartic as hell. Then came the paint. I hired a local artist to design a mural on the side of my building, the wall that directly faced the neighborhood. It depicted a peaceful cityscape with people respecting boundaries, waving from their own lawns, and actually asking before throwing a party. Subtle, but clear. A visual lesson in basic decency, painted 10 feet high in vibrant color. Kids loved it. Adults took selfies with it. Brenda, presumably, had to stare at it every time she drove by. Justice in brushstrokes. But the real masterpiece came later. The HOA, now under new leadership and desperate for redemption, reached out with a proposal. They wanted to host a community event, not a block party, not a chaos-fueled circus, but an actual, organized, permitted neighborhood fair. One with booths, food trucks, music, and proper insurance. They wanted my lot again, but this time they were asking. Not just asking. Offering payment, insurance coverage, cleanup crews, and full co-management. I said yes. With one condition. There had to be a dunk tank. And the volunteer going in first? Brenda. They thought I was joking. I wasn't. To their credit, the new board loved the idea. They offered it to Brenda as a kind of peace gesture. Come be part of the community again, show people you can laugh at yourself, rebuild. Brenda's response? She slammed the door in someone's face and posted a 2,000-word rant on Nextdoor accusing the new board of colluding with a corporate landlord to bully a female homeowner. The post was flagged for misinformation and removed in 20 minutes. The fair went forward without her. And it was perfect. Families showed up in droves. Kids ran around with balloon swords. Someone brought goats. My lot had never looked so lively. Rico even made an appearance, parking one of his trucks in the corner with a sign that read, "In case of emergency," or Brenda. People posed for pictures with it. I set up a booth selling refurbished gadgets and handed out flyers about my business. I made connections, took appointments, gave out popsicles. My company got more positive attention that day than in the past 2 years combined. I even scored a deal with the new HOA to upgrade their security systems. Cameras, locks, motion sensors, the works. Their old vendor? Mine. So I offered a deep discount. Full circle. And just when I thought the day couldn't get better, a little girl tugged on my sleeve and pointed toward the mural. "Did you draw that?" "No," I said, crouching beside her. "But I helped make it happen." She nodded solemnly, then pointed at the smiling cartoon woman on the far left, the one nervously holding a flyer. "She looks like my mom when she gets mad." I nearly choked trying not to laugh. As the sun set, I stood at the edge of the lot, the same spot Brenda had stood that chaotic morning, barking orders like she owned the world. The difference was night and day. Where there had been noise and arrogance, now there was laughter, respect, and cooperation. The community had changed, not just in leadership but in attitude, and I wasn't just the guy who owned the lot anymore. I was part of the neighborhood, not by force, by invitation. A few days later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No note, no name, just a check, made out for $83,760.73. The full amount from my invoice, paid in full. No apology, no explanation, just closure. I deposited it with a grin. Brenda hasn't been seen much since. Her house went up for sale 3 weeks later. Word around the block is she's moving to a gated community 2 towns over. No HOA there, just rules. Irony at its finest. As for me, I bought another commercial lot across town. Bigger. Better. Maybe someday it'll have its own mural. Maybe even its own story. But this one's finished. And every time someone parks in my lot now, they do it with permission. The way it should have always been.